I love juries. I think they're a great... Okay, we'll fix the table.
How can this be going to trial when there's no evidence?
And my other fun pet peeve today was the 1 millionth client who's discussed with me why there's no evidence, absolutely no evidence against them in this case. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's kind of like the 20 minutes into the conversation question that we get like almost every single time, right? It's
Oh my God, there's no evidence
at
against
the very
me.
end, it's just like, well, I just have one question for you. How is it that this is even going to trial when they have no evidence?
Yeah.
And then we both like look at each other and be like, okay, who's going to handle this one this time? You or me?
What's so frustrating from like the view behind of what we do is to try and explain and get across to people who ordinarily wouldn't give a flying fuck about the criminal justice system and the laws that are put into place by our government that impact people disproportionately or help to create wrongful convictions, because it doesn't happen to their family or friends. But when it does, then they start to get interested, and you have to explain all the shit that the government does that makes it a very realistic possibility that they can be convicted, and then explain to them the rules of evidence. And that, a person who gives a statement to police actually has given evidence to the police which can be used at a trial to convict them. But they just don't care about that until the moment they're in your office. And it takes a Herculean effort to try and get them to understand this. But it's the lack of understanding or acceptance or wanting to care about what goes on in our society as a whole until the very moment that they or a family member is charged that sometimes I find very difficult to deal with, because we're in a position of having to justify to our clients why there's a case against them in the first instance. And that's a challenge, and that's why I need Scotch.
I know. That's why Scotch helps when we actually decide to stop working. But I think it's kind of like, the freedom of speech issue, where everybody says, oh, yeah, I support freedom of speech. Although actually there's quite a few people now who say they don't. But the important thing with that issue is that you don't know if you really support free speech until you find yourself supporting speech that you hate, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that you have to protect that is because if you're not aware of the encroachment on freedom of speech and you don't stand up for it, then pretty soon it comes for you, right? So,
well, I mean, what I've found, and what our clients don't seem to understand, and what you get asked by friends and family, not my lovely wife who now understands the insanity that I work within, is just what system this really is and how difficult it is to work within it and try and help these people when they come to us in such dire straits and get them through this system and understand it. And we talk about all sorts of great constitutional ideas and ways to protect things like freedom of speech and freedom of association, and we want to strike down all sorts of things to help people, like this case that we have with prostitution laws, where they were originally struck down, then the conservative government came up with this new regime that's even worse. But, just trying to understand all this and get it communicated to the client, and understanding what we have to do behind the scenes to get this, going for them and to try and get them to the place where they need to go is a massive challenge. And I find that, what's frustrating is we don't have a larger discourse or discussion about this in the public domain about criminal justice, because people just don't give a shit. It's not politically expedient for our politicians. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about what Prime Minister Trudeau and his Justice Ministry are going to do with mandatory minimums now. But I'm just so interested in how, maybe it's because we practice criminal law and we work within the field, that we care about it, we listen to it, like all the other stuff that comes out from our government, but how people really just don't pay attention to it until we're called in to help somebody who's charged.